morning, my friends, and welcome to another exciting installment of Monday Reload. From very high above all the puerile and vapid forms of Wyoming mainstream media, this is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly and permanently ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Monday. One of the really cool things that's happening during this election is a lot of political newcomers, or at least newcomers to the Wyoming legislature. At the very least, there's over 40. It was never our founders' intent to have career politicians. Our entire system was set up so that you could go and serve your community for a couple of years. When you're done, come back and continue farming or ranching or whatever it is that you did. And Wyoming probably has the last citizen legislature in the entire country. But even so, there are several people in the Wyoming legislature that have been there for a very long time. Some of them conservative, some of them not so much. Now, I'm not suggesting at all that I'm in favor of term limits. Quite the opposite. I'm absolutely opposed to them. There's a couple of very good reasons why. First, they're unconstitutional. You see, our founders had faith in the people, and that when a community got tired of the person representing them in either their state capital or in Washington, D.C., well, then they would get rid of them. Term limits would necessarily remove the choice of the people. Secondly, the biggest problem we have in our electoral system is voter apathy. Only about half of the eligible voters in Wyoming are actually registered to vote, and only half of those actually find their way to the polls on Election Day. Term limits would just decrease the reasons why people would actually get out and vote. Well, why should I go vote? That guy is out in 2 years anyway. That'd be ridiculous. And if you think that we have bad representatives now, just wait until you institute term limits. No, the real solution is for voters to educate themselves, to make knowledgeable decisions about the people who are running for office. We need to become engaged, actually involved in our system of government. And about the only way that you could convince people to do that is to show them what's actually happening down in your state capital or in Washington, D.C., to prove to them that they're actually being robbed. The taxes are so high that the government is taking in more money than it actually needs to operate. In the last legislative session, that is 2023, the Wyoming state government took in $700 million over and above what they actually wanted to spend. I'm telling you, my friends, I sat there and watched them. They attempted to spend every last dollar that wasn't nailed down, and they still had $700 million of them left over. In the past legislative session, it was around $500 million that they put in the bank, or what they call the bank. Really, what it is a series of trust funds that are easily accessible for later. So what I'm telling you, my friends, is you have to educate your friends and neighbors. Show them the proof that they are being lied to by a lot of these politicians. And hopefully, if they get mad enough, as I'm guessing these 44 or so people did during this filing period, they'll march their butt down to the courthouse and file to run for office. One of those guys that tried to spend every last dollar that he could get his hands on is Lloyd Larsen. Larsen represents House District 54 over in Lander in Fremont County. This year, the person that finally got fed up with all of his antics is Tina Clifford. She's a former school teacher and all around a pretty educated and nice lady. About 2 weeks ago, I sat down to have a discussion with her, and I'll bring you that interview in just a second. But first, let's get a word in from our sponsors. Monday Reload is brought to you by the Buffalo Wool Company. A lot of people think that you can't wear wool during the summer, that you'll just get too hot and sweaty, and it's only good for cold winter days. But that's just not true, my friends. The socks from the Buffalo Wool Company will keep your feet cool and dry even on the hottest of summer days. And I'm telling you, my friends, I have tested these things out, and I am absolutely enamored with them. You should really get you a pair and try them out. To find a pair of socks from the Buffalo Wool Company, go to their website, thebuffalowoolco.com. You are definitely not going to be disappointed. Cowboy State Politics is also brought to you by the Wyoming Cartridge Company. They make quality ammunition at a fair price, delivering real value and reliability. And they're based right here in Sheridan, Wyoming. Actually, their offices are right around the corner from the Cowboy State Politics studio. I've shot their ammunition, my friends, and it performs just as well as any other ammunition that you might buy off of any shelf. To get you a box of it, to try it out, you can go to Rocky Mountain Discount Sports in Sheridan and in Casper, at the Wyoming Gun Company, the Sheridan Commercial Company, the Sheridan Co-op, Bighorn Trading, and the Pawn Broker. Also in Buffalo at Cornerstone Pharmacy. Are you currently living in a liberal utopia like Colorado or California, and you finally made the decision to move to a red state? Now, the person you need to talk to is Rebecca Bechstel at Compass Real Estate. Her phone number is 307-699-3519. She's got her fingers on the pulse of the real estate market all across the state of Wyoming, and she's sold everything from small residential properties all the way up to big giant ranches. Now, if you're one of those unfortunate souls that thought you were moving to a red state and ended up in the only liberal county and have decided that it's time to sell out and actually move to Wyoming, well, then Rebecca's your gal in that situation as well. Give her a call. Again, her phone number is 307-699-3519. That's Rebecca Bechstel at Compass Real Estate. And now, on with the program. Tina Clifford is running for the House of Representatives in House District 54. That's over in Lander. She joins me now on the program via Zoom. Tina, welcome to Cowboy State Politics.
Thanks, David. Good to be here.
The first thing that I ask anybody that's on the show that hasn't been on before is just to tell my listeners about yourself.
I was raised in Fremont County, and I graduated from Windover High School, graduated from CWC and UW. I'm a teacher. Or I used to be a teacher, and I'm a mom, I'm a wife, and I'm a grandma.
Wow. You sound like you're a busy lady. Out of curiosity, what subject did you teach? Or did you just teach high school? Or, tell me about it.
I taught high school business for quite a few years. And then the last job that I had was here at Lander Valley High School, and I was an educational technologist, and I taught teachers how to use technology.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, let's get into it. First, you sound like you're a busy lady, grandma, you got lots of stuff going on. What possessed you to run for office?
Running for office was never anything that I really thought I wanted to do or that I would do. And I've been helping homeschool my grandkids, and all of a sudden, things just kind of opened up, and I was able to do that. My opponent didn't have anybody else running against him. And I thought, somebody's got to run against him. And I guess this time it was me.
I have a good friend of mine that says, if you're having trouble finding a candidate to run, maybe that candidate is you. Sounds like that may have been the situation.
Yeah, that's pretty much what happened.
Okay, so then let's get into some issues. First thing, and I've been asking a lot of candidates this because one of the major problems we have in the state legislature is we've got a bunch of people that run as Republicans, but the truth is they vote like Democrats almost 80% of the time. First question is, what does it mean to you to be a Republican?
To me, being a Republican means freedom, living life on your own terms, having the government leave you alone. You get to have a piece of that American pie and do with it, what you want, just live your life. I think it's kind of changed with Republicans because there are so many people that run, Democrats that run as Republicans. It doesn't mean the same thing anymore. And they don't like the Republican Party platform. And for the life of me, I don't know why they run as Republicans if they don't like the platform that they're running on. There are plenty of other parties to choose from. It'd make it a lot nicer if they would just do that. But I think Republican to me means freedom and liberty.
You brought up the Republican Party platform. In my mind, there isn't a single thing on there that I personally disagree with. Sometimes I'm kind of baffled by some of the responses I get from people who are down in Cheyenne. And the comment I always hear is, well, you only have to agree with 80% of it. So my first question is always, okay, so what's the 20% that you disagree with? Why don't you tell me that? And then we'll talk about the other 80. So my question to you is, you seem to be familiar with the Republican Party platform. Is there anything in there that you would clarify, that you would change, that you might have a different opinion on?
No. Well, I was secretary for the party for a couple of years, so I've been involved, precinct committee woman, and I think that the Republican Party platform is an excellent summary of our state and federal constitutions. And so there's nothing about that I disagree with. So there's nothing I think needs any clarification. I think it's pretty straightforward. And I was listening to Kathy Russell's interview with you, and she talked about what they did to try and condense it, bring it down into one page. I think they did a fantastic job.
Now, I don't know if you were at the Republican convention down in Cheyenne this year, but they have committee meetings, just like we do at your county convention. And the platform committee, I think they met for a grand total of 15 minutes. And just listening to the audio from it, really, they were like, "Yeah, we don't need to make any changes. We're good. Meeting adjourned." For me, that being a Republican, and I look at the platform, and like I said, I don't disagree with anything on there, and I mean, really, I look at it, and I think that it is a statement of fundamental values and principles that if you're a Republican, you ought to agree with those things. So let me just ask you about the first plank of the platform. For me, this is a really big one. So how are you on abortion?
I am very pro-life. I am against abortion.
All right. Is there any exceptions that you would add, or just against abortion all across the board?
I'm against abortion all across the board. My mother is adopted, and she is the best person I know. What if her mother would have thought that way? I wouldn't have my mom. And I think that, none of us choose to be here. That's just the way it works. And I don't think that it's up to the child to pay the penalty for something else that has happened. I mean, none of us have anything to do with us being here. And you just make the best out of it. I don't believe in exceptions. I think beautiful things can come out of even something that might not be so great.
Excellent. I'm glad to hear that. Let's talk about what is probably the number one issue in Wyoming, or at least it's the one I hear about all the time: property taxes. Two questions. First, do you think that our property tax system has some problems? And if you do, how would you go about fixing them?
I do think that our property tax system has problems. I think that once you pay for a house, it should be yours. And I don't think we should have to rent from the government. I feel bad for people who are on fixed incomes, who have worked so hard to get their houses paid for so they could enjoy their golden years and, not have to worry about a place to live. And then now taxes just keep going up and up. And with this last tax bill that went through, House Bill 45, they're capping it at 4%. And so that means they're going to be able to do 4% every year. So what are these people going to do? And are they going to have to sell their homes and try and find somewhere else to live? I think it's terrible. I think the way to fix all this stuff, spending, they have to quit spending so much money. And I think they should put a cap on what they're doing, stop the bleeding, if you will, and maybe do a cut across the board, like every budget gets 5% taken off of it. And then from there, how about we do an audit? How about you go in and you look and see what people are spending their money on? And then you know exactly where's a good place to cut, instead of saying, okay, we're just going to cut everything, or we're just going to cut all of this. And then you're very specific about what's going to be done. And I think that would be smart to do that.
I was looking through your website before our interview started, and I really liked what you had to say that, when you're talking about taxes, you have to also talk about spending because one drives the other. So if you had the magic wand and, you were the person in charge, where would you start cutting?
I think one of the things that we need to do is look at the state constitution and constitutionally, what are we supposed to cover? So one of the things that we're supposed to cover is education. That our constitution says that we will pay for that. So I think we need to go make sure that we're meeting all of those marks. But then other things that I think where we could maybe cut would be, say, the tourism department. So I was sitting up in the gallery this session, and Bill Allemond was there, and he put forth an amendment, and I think it was there for third reading. And he got up and he said, okay, during second reading, I put forth an amendment to cut the budget by $2 million. You guys voted no on that. So how about we split the difference? So that was his third reading amendment, was to cut it by $1 million. No, they wouldn't cut that. They wanted to have $700,000 for a float in the parade, in Pasadena. That kind of stuff, I think we could probably do without, especially when people are looking at how am I going to be able to afford to pay my taxes so I can stay in my house? So I think that might be a good place to look at cutting. And thanks to Bill for doing that. I thought that was a pretty good place to cut. And so I'm glad that he brought that amendment.
Yeah, that was one of the few wins we got this session. And there were a lot of things that were just absolutely mind-blowing. The float was one of them. There was a couple of others. A lot of money for an air show that thankfully didn't happen in Casper, so we didn't have to spend that money. And there was a lot of other frivolous spending. So I have to ask you, was this the first time that you've actually gone down and watched the session for any length of time?
Yes. I wanted to do that last year, but the roads were so bad. And so I didn't make it down very often. So I watched a lot on, YouTube. But yeah, this year was the first time I had spent much time down there.
Now, I know when I went down there, I was pretty naive. And the first time I had just started the program. I know that the first time sitting up in the gallery made a pretty lasting impression on me. So I just want to ask you, what was your first impression when you finally got a handle on what was happening on the floor and you're sitting there watching them? What went through your mind?
I was shocked. And I thought, you know what? Everybody should have to sit in this gallery and watch what's going on because you don't see it and you don't hear it. One of the things that really kind of blew my mind is to watch people sit there and they calculate. So everybody votes. They do the roll call vote. And then the clerk calls the score, basically. And then does anybody want to change their vote? So then they sit there and they calculate. And it's like, okay, if I change my vote, then I look good. I can say good, but I know that there will be enough people that will do this, that, they won't change their votes. So it'll still fail, but I can vote like a conservative. And that's what vote gets put in the digest so that I can tell people, yeah, I voted like that. That shocked me. I was not aware that went on.
The soon-to-be Mrs. Iverson, Christine, that was her first time down at the session, and the vote was whether they were going to enact a tax on streaming services. And she watched the very same thing that you're talking about. They all vote one way, and then they kind of see the score, and then it was like one after another, just like dominoes falling, that they all changed their vote so they wouldn't be caught voting for a tax. And it took me probably, I don't know, a good solid 2 hours to calm her down after that, just because she saw it with her own eyes. And she had been told all along that, these people that represent her, well, we're conservatives. So, just is absolutely mind-blowing. And I agree with you. Everybody should go down there and watch what happens on that floor. Now, you were a teacher for a long time, and I'm sure that you have an interesting perspective on education. So the first thing I want to talk to you about is, we spend a tremendous amount of money on education. This year, it's right around $20,000 a year per student. And we rank, our student test scores are pretty much mediocre. I mean, it depends on where you look, but pretty much every time Wyoming is right in the middle, 26th, 27th, 25th. So my question to you, Tina, since you've been in education for a long time, why are we having such a hard time educating our kids?
Well, obviously, it's money's not the problem, right? Because that's a lot of money per student, and we're not getting the results. So it's not like we need to throw more money at it. Maybe we should have less money and do different things. So when I was teaching, they started to put in the standards. And I think once they started with the standards, things just got really weird because then you start worrying about checking this box, checking the other box. Everybody's got to do this. And you're not really making sure that learning is going on. You're just hitting these different benchmarks and just making these checks. When I was working as an educational technologist, we have early outs on Wednesdays, and we had to go through a bunch of books and tests and worksheets and stuff and look for any kind of biases that were in any of those materials because we don't want to have biased materials. So we went through all this stuff. We wrote it all down, turned it in. Nothing happened. Still used the books, still used the worksheets. It's just check. We looked for bias, and that was it. I think there's a lot of regulations, a lot of administrative duties that need to be done that really don't have much to do with education. I mean, they say that it does, and it sounds good. It really sounds good. We're going to look for bias. But then if you don't fix it, what does that mean? It doesn't work. And so I think there's just a lot of that kind of stuff. Also, when I first started for this last district that I worked for, if you were not a tenured teacher, you had to go for like 7 days or something before everybody else showed up. And you went through training, and they were like teaching you methodologies and all this stuff that we would have gotten in college, in school. And we got paid for it. Why? Either you're qualified to teach or you're not. So, they added that kind of stuff on there, and it cost a lot of money. And so money's not the issue. They need to just go back to teaching kids. Like my college professor used to say, kids need to learn how to read, write, speak, spell, and calculate. And it seems like we're doing just everything but.
Fair enough. So you brought up teacher tenure, and this is one of the things that my mom, I should tell you this, she's pretty much run the grade school in Buffalo for like 25 years. We all know that it's not the principal that runs the school, it's the head secretary. She and I go around and around about a lot of these topics, and so anytime I get a chance to talk to somebody who's lived the education system, worked in it, I try to take advantage of that. So talk to me about teacher tenure. Is that a positive force in education? And whatever your answer is, why?
I think teacher tenure allows teachers to be there that I think it's really easy to get comfortable and lazy. And so when I've been in the school district, I've seen teachers that were absolutely fantastic and loved what they did, and they worked really hard, and the kids loved the classes and did very well. And then there are the teachers that just go and they run off copies of worksheets, the same worksheets every year. And they get to keep their job just like the other teachers do. And so that I don't think is good. But when they try to tie teacher performance to, or whether or not a teacher is going to stay working based on student scores, I don't think that's a very good measure either. I guess it would just kind of depend on what if the kids are like, yeah, I don't like this person, let's just all flunk the test, and then they lose their job, or, I think it has to be a little more involved than that too. So, and at one time they were talking about maybe doing something like that.
Okay. All right. Last question on education, and then I'll move on. Do we spend enough on education in Wyoming, or do we spend not enough? I mean, you mentioned money doesn't seem to be the problem. If it's not the issue, would you cut education spending?
I think you could. And I think you could cut education spending without cutting teachers. So whenever you talk about cutting education spending, then everybody gets all upset because they think that you want to cut the teachers. Well, you can cut a lot of stuff going on in education without cutting teachers. If you could cut administration, I think because there's so much regulation and everything is so top heavy with that, I think you could cut there and put it back into the classroom, put it back into the having more teachers so you can get more one-on-one with the kids.
All right, well, let's move on. If you listen to the program, and I think that you do, you'll know that I'm kind of a gun nut. And this year in the legislative session, we had a number of gun bills that I thought were very exciting. Unfortunately, the governor disagreed with me. Do we need to arm teachers in Wyoming schools?
I think that would be a very good idea. I think we do. Yes.
Okay.
I think a gun-free zone is just an advertisement for an easy mark. And I think it puts kids at danger. When I was working in the schools, we had a group that we had to go through all this training and talk about school safety issues and what we would do if there was a shooter and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, that's just the world we live in. And we have to prepare for those kinds of things. But I think if we had teachers that were armed, that would go a long way towards helping students. So helping save students.
During this legislative session, probably more than any of the others I've watched, there seemed to be a lot more, I'm just going to call it voting against the Second Amendment. And let me just ask you straight out, what is your stance on the Second Amendment?
I believe that people have the right to protect themselves. And I don't think anybody has the right to tell anybody else, no, you don't. You don't need to own that many guns. Says who? All the things that they talk about with what size magazine that you can have with your gun or how many guns that you can own. Why does somebody need to have this many guns? Because they want to. I think people need to be able to protect themselves, and to think that you're going to call the cops, which is probably a good thing to do, but they can't get there quick enough sometimes. And so you need to be able to protect yourself.
Is there anything such as reasonable restrictions on firearms?
I would think that not giving a gun to somebody who's done a gun crime would be a pretty good restriction.
So talk to me about your opponent, Lloyd Larsen. What are some things that you disagree with that he's done? Kind of an open-ended question.
I think he likes taxes a lot. He's on the Appropriations Committee, and I think he's very good at knowing the budget and how to get more money. He likes to spend a lot of money, and he works to make sure that that happens. He's one of the ones that changes his votes a lot. I've talked to him about the special session back in over the pandemic stuff, and he didn't want that. And he worked very hard to make sure that that thing tanked. So I was not happy about that. He voted against the proposed special session this year. So you vote on all these bills and yep, we get them passed. And then the governor vetoes them. And then, oh yeah, no, we're not going to have a special session. We're going to vote against it. Well, he'll vote against things and then he'll say, oh, that was a bad bill. But he doesn't say why it's a bad bill, but he says it's a bad bill. And a lot of people just accept that from him. And they repeat it, but they don't have any idea why it's a bad bill. I'm just kind of tired of that too.
Fair enough. Well, I think you're absolutely right in all of those things. I've had the pleasure or displeasure, however you want to look at it, of watching 3 sessions in a row and the special session. So it's I've got a front row seat to Double L Lloyd Larsen. Well, Tina, we've talked about a number of issues during our discussion today. Is there anything that we missed that you want to bring up? Anything at all?
I guess the thing that I would like to add is that I hope people will cast an informed vote this year. There's a lot of things that are going on. I'm very concerned about property taxes. I'm concerned about stuff that's going on with kids, protecting kids. Some people share my thoughts on that and some people don't. But I think there's a lot at stake. going on. And I would very much hope that people would vet the candidates and do their research. And when you walk into that polling booth on August 20th, I would hope that people would cast an informed vote, because we're going to lose this thing if we don't. And I'm very concerned about that too. And that's why I wanted to run, is because I'm third generation American, and my great grandparents came here with nothing. And they came here because this was the land of opportunity. And I want to make sure that my grandchildren have those same options to prosper. I think it's very important.
Where did your grandparents immigrate from?
On one side, they're Germans from Russia. My great-grandfather and great-grandmother came here. He had $5 in his pocket, a little kid, and a pregnant wife. And they made that trip. And then the other side, they came from Mexico, and very, very poor there. They've done well. So well, my brother, he's got a master's degree from Notre Dame.
Wow.
So you have people who are coming from Mexico, where they're farming and they're dirt poor, to, having a grandson that has a master's degree from Notre Dame. I'd say that's pretty good.
Yeah, I'd say they didn't do too shabby, if you ask me. Well, Tina, if people want to get a hold of you, how do they do that?
My website is Tina Clifford for HD54.org. My email address is Tina Clifford for HD54@gmail.com. And my telephone number is 307-349-0624.
Well, thank you very much for joining me on today's program. I really appreciate it. And of course, you're welcome back here anytime you like. So thank you very much, Tina.
Thanks, David.
That'll do it for today's installment of the program. Have a good week, and we'll talk again on Wednesday. Just a quick programming note before I let you go. If you like to listen to Cowboy State Politics on the Independence Network, we've got a bit of a schedule change planned for Wednesday. Cowboy State Politics will be aired at 11 o'clock instead of our normal 10 o'clock time slot. Our pal Joey Correnti actually has an interview with Landon Brown. That's going to start at 9 a.m. and be played into the 10 o'clock time slot. But for now, from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics studio, I'm David Iverson, and this is the one and only Cowboy State Politics.